Thank you for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel ending its military action against terrorists at the Shifa hospital, calling it one of the most successful operations in the war in Gaza. And as the Israeli defense minister says, captured Hamas operatives are saying the group is, quote, collapsing from within. Despite Israel's success on the battlefield, demonstrators opposing the Netanyahu government take to the streets again as the families of Israeli hostages join anti-government protests in the largest rallies since the October 7th terrorist attacks. While the world is focusing on the fighting in Gaza, another threat is rising in Asia, the possibility of a war with North Korea armed with nuclear weapons. And here at home, the move of God on college campuses still underway as hundreds of students get saved and baptized at the University of Alabama. All those stories and more ahead today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin this half hour in Israel as Israel says it has successfully wrapped up its assault at the Shifa hospital. And the defense minister says captured Hamas members are saying the group is collapsing. Amid the warfare, Israel's Prime Minister says ending the fighting in Gaza now will not help bring the hostages home. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us the story from Jerusalem.
The largest group representing hostage families formally joined anti-government protests for the largest rallies since the October 7th massacre. They are calling for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition to go because it failed to free the hostages alongside those who've wanted to oust Netanyahu for years.
This is a government that has failed us repeatedly from last year, that when they tried to pass the judicial overhaul.
6 months after the massacre of October 7th, that in order to win, we need new leadership. In order to bring back the hostages, we need new leadership.
The Tikva Forum, another group representing families of hostages, issued a statement saying, a significant number of abductees' families are shocked by the political activity. They also believe a continued military campaign is the best way to free the hostages. Just before he underwent successful hernia surgery Sunday night, the Prime Minister held a news conference. He also struck back at calls for new elections, saying they'll freeze Israel just before it defeats Hamas.
They will paralyze the negotiations for the release of our hostages. They will bring the war to an end before the completion of its objectives. And the first to bless it will be Hamas, and that says everything.
Israeli forces completed a 2-week operation against Hamas terrorists in Al-Shifa hospital. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says captured Hamas leaders are admitting the terror group is collapsing from within. Despite public pressure to end the fighting, the Biden administration approved shipments of fighter jets and thousands of bombs to Israeli forces. While the fighting has affected Easter celebrations, a large crowd showed up for the Resurrection Day sunrise service at Jerusalem's Garden Tomb. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Our Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem with more. So, Chris, what did the Israeli Defense Forces accomplish in the terror operation at the Shifa hospital?
Well, there were about 6,000 civilians who were evacuated from the hospital in that area. There were about 200 terrorists eliminated and about 500 that were arrested. All this while doing and with no loss of civilian life during that operation. It's just a remarkable lesson in urban warfare. John Spencer, who's a military historian, said, really the kind of urban warfare that Israel has been doing, including what they've done in the Shifa hospital, is just remarkable and sometimes, not even replicated by any military in the world. What they're doing is they're not only operating, within tight quarters, but also trying to do what they can to prevent civilian lives. One of the things they found there in the maternity ward, Ephraim, was a whole host of weapons that Kalashnikov weapons, sniper rifles, grenades, all sorts of weapons inside a maternity ward, and that was kind of replicated in different parts of the hospital. It had been used as a terror base. Many of these, there was an operation back in November that cleared the hospital out, destroyed the tunnels underneath, but the terrorists returned, and this is probably a textbook operation of what urban warfare can do by the IDF.
Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says senior Hamas operatives are telling Israeli interrogators the group is, quote, collapsing from within. What more can you tell us about that, and what more did he have to say?
Well, he also says that they've captured some of the some of the Hamas terrorists that were involved in October 7th. They've also eliminated some that were actually part of a hostage deal back in 2011 with one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. Some of those were involved in the October 7th massacre. So they're actually eliminating much of the senior operation leaders of Hamas, which explains why many of these interrogated Hamas terrorists are saying that is actually imploding from within. And it's just another sign that the IDF operation that began just a couple of weeks after October 7th is being successful. Right now, the main thing that they're looking at is what they're going to do with in Rafah, which is the final battalion, the last Hamas stronghold with 4 battalions there. But that's been on hold because of the United States and the Islamic holiday of Ramadan, which ends in a few days. We'll see what happens after that.
How has the government there responded to a report that Israel was starving people in Gaza?
Well, they're saying it's not true. They're saying what they're doing, that there's no limit on the amount of aid going into Gaza Strip, the northern Gaza, or down in the central part of Gaza. They say that the main thing is that the United Nations, UNRWA, and other aid groups are not able to sufficiently distribute the aid once it gets inside. Just the last week, Senator Lindsey Graham, who was visiting here, he said what was this idea that Israel is starving Gazans is just a blood libel. So he says it's just not true. And yet the UN is saying that they're really putting the blame on Israel right now. And they're also saying that, more aid is going into Gaza now than it went into Gaza before October 7th.
Chris, we often hear about the growing number of casualties in the fighting. What can you tell us about the number of Gazans killed during the war thus far?
Well, I can tell you that the number right now that is cited by most people, including President Biden and other world leaders, is about 33,000. Those numbers come from the Hamas Health Ministry, which has a vested interest in exaggerating those numbers for propaganda value. What those 33,000 that number doesn't include was the number of Hamas terrorists that have been killed since the ground operation. That's estimated to be around 13,000. And that also doesn't include the number of Gazans that have been killed by misfired rockets. There's been about, I think, 900 people or so killed by rockets that never made it out of Gaza, but misfired. Some people say this is one of the lowest ratios in combat and urban warfare, and yet many of the news media and many world leaders, like I mentioned, President Biden and others, quote that number, 33,000, without any caveats to that number. So it really adds to the pressure on Israel.
Despite Israel's success in the war against Hamas, there are still, as we saw, growing protests over the hostages. And Benjamin Netanyahu is saying he is doing everything he can to bring the hostages home. How serious is this challenge for Netanyahu's coalition?
Well, it's a serious threat, Ephraim, but it may not be one that's going to overthrow the government. This is a coalition, as Julie said in her report, of those that before October 7th wanted to topple the government, and also some of the hostages' families. But not all the hostage families want to participate politically. Some are mortified that actually politics is involved in the future of their loved ones. And that the attention should be on Hamas and Qatar, which is the ally of Hamas. The most serious threat to the government would appear to be what's called the Haredi draft law, which is trying to bring the Haredi into the IDF. And that could be a threat internally to the coalition, maybe a far greater threat than these protests we see in the streets.
All right, Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem, thanks as always for your insight. Stay safe and know that we here are praying for you and our team there in Israel. Coming up, the international community is focusing on Israel's battle against Hamas in Gaza, but another conflict may be brewing very quietly in another part of the world, as concerns are growing of a possible war between the United States and a nuclear North Korea. We're going to bring you the story when we come back. While the world watches the conflicts in the Middle East and Europe, trouble is brewing in another part of the globe, the Korean Peninsula. The U.S. and South Korean militaries recently finished up large-scale war games. As CBN's Dale Hurd reports, they came amid heightened concerns over the threat of a conflict with North Korea armed with nuclear weapons.
Is North Korean leader Kim Jong-un about to go to war with South Korea and the United States? Some experts think it's possible. Kim has ordered his military to prepare for the occupation of South Korea and is, according to some, engaged in frantic military development. And after South Korea and the United States began the Freedom Shield 24 exercises designed to deter a North Korean invasion, it only caused Kim to issue more threats of war. The task of North Korean experts has always been to try to separate bluster from real threats. And in the past, it's usually been bluster. Bong Young-shik at the Institute for North Korean Studies in Seoul says it's bluster, meant to undermine the current South Korean government from winning parliamentary elections in April. A disturbing report earlier this year by the respected 38 North website, however, indicates this time Kim may be serious. 38 North reports Kim Jong-un has made a strategic decision to go to war because the communist government sees a window of opportunity to forcibly reunify the Korean peninsula. If the report is true, Asian expert Gordon Chang believes it would be part of a wider Asian war.
North Korea wouldn't go to war unless it got the approval of both Moscow and Beijing. So probably if North Korea were to attack South Korea, it would be in conjunction with China attacking Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, India.
Concerns about North Korea's nuclear program have grown in the past 2 years, as the North has test-launched missiles at a record pace and openly threatened to launch a nuclear attack on the United States. Chang does not necessarily agree that North Korea is preparing for war, but says if it is, the blame falls on the White House for appearing weak.
An important part of this article that I believe is absolutely true, and that is the authors maintain that Kim Jong-un believes that the United States is in global retreat and that essentially he can pretty much do what he wants. That is a very dangerous mentality. And this is a thinking that also affects Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. The United States needs to reestablish deterrence because at this moment, the bad actors think that they have a green light.
Kim Jong-un did something very strange a few weeks ago. While touring North Korea's impoverished countryside, he said publicly he's ashamed and sorry for neglecting the economy. It was very uncharacteristic of a leader with a reputation for being ruthless. It could mean Kim finally has a heart, or it could mean he knows a stronger economy will be needed if he's going to fight a war. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, marijuana brings in money, so more and more states are legalizing it, but it can also mean significant dangers for those who use it. We're going to take a look at how serious the risks can be and how some are pushing back. We've got the story for you right after this. Psychosis, paranoia, and delusions, those are just some of the side effects of marijuana use. A growing number of states are legalizing marijuana. They say they see it as a financial windfall, but doctors, parents, and former addicts are pushing back. CBN's medical reporter Lori Johnson brings us the story.
Johnny Stack grew up as a smart, happy boy in a Christian home. At age 14, however, marijuana use changed his life forever, leading to ultimate tragedy.
He took his own life when he was 19 years old, 5 years later, after he became psychotic, very delusional and paranoid and suspicious from using the marijuana.
His mother, Laura, didn't realize today's marijuana contains at least 10 times the psychoactive compound THC than it did 20 years ago.
In my head, I said, it's just weed. I used it when I was a girl. I'm fine. It's no big deal. And I was so wrong.
Indeed, no matter whether you call it weed, pot, or cannabis, today's marijuana products are a very big deal.
And the higher the dose of THC, for example, the higher the likelihood that you will end up with a psychotic episode. And that will lead you to end up in the emergency room department.
Zach Plant's addiction could have killed him.
I had, thoughts of other people wanting to hurt me, thoughts of the only way of, being safe was to end my own life.
Doctors diagnosed Zach with cannabis-induced psychosis due to symptoms including losing touch with reality, hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia. Doctors gave him a stark warning.
If you smoke marijuana again, there's a chance that you don't come out of psychosis. You go back into it, and your brain may never recover.
Studies show a steep rise in ER visits, especially where marijuana products are more available.
As it became legal, definitely saw more delirium, hallucinations, paranoia as being side effects of this, and then even just normal depression, anxiety.
High THC levels can also cause severe vomiting, heart and lung complications, sexual dysfunction, and stomach paralysis.
They would come in and have long bouts of being unable to eat. This would last for 3 or 4 days, and it was well known that it was due to marijuana.
Despite the risks, more states continue to legalize. South Carolina, one of only 4 states where marijuana is still fully banned, is considering legalizing medical use.
I really don't like it. It's a way to simply legalize marijuana outright. It's been a camel's nose under the tent for years. We've seen this in multiple states.
In Virginia, lawmakers voted to make it the first southern state to okay recreational sales of marijuana. The bill's sponsor, State Senator Aaron Rouse, tells CBN News it will give opportunities for Virginians to earn a living, start a business, and create true generational wealth. The measure is now in the hands of Governor Glenn Youngkin, who signaled he might veto the measure, saying, "You want to talk about putting a cannabis shop on every corner? I don't quite get it."
It's causing psychosis, schizophrenia, mental health problems. I can't imagine he's not going to veto it.
There's also growing concern over another substance known as Delta-8. Unlike marijuana, Delta-8 comes from hemp, but it can also contain very high levels of THC. Believe it or not, you can often buy Delta-8 at convenience stores and gas stations, even in states where commercial sales of marijuana are illegal. That's because the 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp nationwide.
It was like 1 or 2 hits of the pen and I would instantly be high.
Nick Sauber discovered he could vape it anywhere because it was odorless and easy to hide.
I could do it in class, I could do it in the bathroom.
Then, much like Johnny and Zach, Nick became addicted and considered ending his life.
In my mind, I was trapped in this delusion of, I have to commit suicide because my parents are going to find out.
After leading an anti-drug coalition for 15 years, Julie Killian found herself totally surprised about Delta-8.
I was at a truck, one of those food trucks, and they were selling coffee in the morning, and you could get a shot of Delta-8 THC in your coffee.
Now she's part of a major push to get rid of it.
We're trying to work on the Hill with federal legislators about changing the definition of hemp in the Farm Bill so that will then be illegal.
Some lawmakers consider Delta-8 such an emergency that they're calling for it to be immediately outlawed.
You do have some states like Wyoming, Florida, and some others that are working to ban them on the statewide level. They're not waiting for Congress to intervene.
Meanwhile, parents struggle to protect their children from these dangerous and readily available substances.
Ultimately, God's word says that we are to be sober-minded. We are to be on the lookout for the devil prowls like a roaring lion, waiting for someone to devour. And marijuana is one way to just sort of numb our children's brains. One other way that Satan is using to get kids to walk away from the faith.
Talk to your kids. It may not seem like they're listening, but I always feel like they're going to be you're going to be in the back of their head and they're going to hear you. So don't ever give up on talking to your kids.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
And Governor Glenn Youngkin did veto that measure. Coming up, another move of God on major college campuses, this time at the University of Alabama, as hundreds of students are baptized. We're going to bring you the story when we come back. Stay with us. A new sign of the ongoing revival among America's young people is being reported out of Alabama. It is the latest example of this supernatural move of God. Hundreds of students at the university gave their lives to Christ and were immediately baptized in a fountain. Christian author and speaker Jenny Allen announced it happened again on Instagram. After the amazing event unfolded last week, she shared thousands of students gathered, hundreds responded to the gospel, and hundreds were baptized. The Awakening Alabama is just the latest move of God that Allen has witnessed as she has traveled to minister on college campuses. And you can find the details at cbnnews.com. Well, time now for your Monday motivation. And I want to leave you with this message as we begin another week together. You can begin again. It is the first day of a new week and new month, and you can begin again. Yesterday is gone, and yes, mistakes may have been made, but you can begin again. Start fresh. You are awakened to new mercies and new grace today, and they are sufficient for the day. Start fresh with Christ and make this a better Monday and a better week. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online, cbnnews.com. Let us know what you think of the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We certainly love to hear from you. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.